Alright, so to continue on from the last video, what I want to do is use one of the, I guess you can call plugins, but in Webpack they call them loaders. And what loaders do is when you want to include any file type within a bundle, via the entry file. Let's just pull that there. Let's say, for instance, in this case, let's just say we decide to import. Let's just do this. So let's say we decide to, we decide to import one of these files within the entry file, right? So we can just do I'm about to import as a SAS. So we import, let's just say we import the navigation, right? And then when we run this bundle, if we execute it, it'll basically read from this file, says, okay, I want to pull this file in, which is a navigation, and I want to process it. So the loader will allow us to process this JavaScript file that we have, and the loader, what it'll do is it'll actually transpile it, which means that any modern JavaScript file that's using ES6, what this means is when we use a loader, what it'll do is it'll read from this entry file and process that file or compile that file via the loader. So to use a loader, and let me just begin to use it so it can make sense, because I know just me explaining it won't make sense. So when we decide to use a loader, what we have to do is put it into a module object, right? And then in the module object, there's a rules block. And the rules is a place where we define how we want to use our loaders, and set those options within the loader, and that being a means to test it. So there's an option called test, and what we want to do is we want this rule, which this will be our first rule. I'm sorry. Let me add an object in there and then test. So this rule is basically going to be a regular expression. So what we want to say is I want my rule to basically find any regular expression, any file that has an extension of .js, right? So let's do that. And then to use the loader, what we want to do is go ahead and pass in loader, and then we'll say Babel loader. I'm sorry, let's use let's see why we're getting let's make sure I did it right. Yeah, okay. So our regular expression is correct. Test loader. Yeah, I had it right the first time. There's other options that allows me to use, but let's go ahead and try that. I had to make sure my regular expression was correct, because a lot of times when you look at some of the directions, They write their regular expressions in an interesting fashion, but it all works the same. So now that I have my rule, my first rule, which is saying, okay, when I execute my Webpack bundle, what it's going to do is read from this entry file, which is the index, and it's going to say, okay, read this file here, and I need you to bundle it. So if it's a ES6 version or ES5 or whatever, what it's going to do is it's actually going to just read from this file however it's written, and it's going to compile it or transpile it in some cases down to vanilla JavaScript. So a readable version of JavaScript that your browser can read, right? All right, so let's go ahead and test it out. This is my server, my WordPress server. So let's just test it and see what happens. So if we go to web projects and ls web demo content, I'm sorry, and I have to go to my clear. And what did I called it Webpack build. All right, so let's see what this error is saying. So it's not written correctly. Let's see. Invalid expression missing. Okay, I'm doing it right. That doesn't seem right. At least from the compiling part. This doesn't seem right, but I've written it correctly. Because it doesn't like that. But I'm trying to account for his character. This is weird. Okay, let's see. So we're going to work this out. On what line? Line 13. This is dumb. Oh, what if it's that? Ah, my dumb ass. I'm sorry. Here we go. So now, boom. All right, so it looks like everything compiled. So these are actually just like warning flags. So basically tell you how do you want to define this, either as development or production. And so you can set these options in line with your project, but there's also ways to use these builds in a fashion where you can have it built for dev and you can have it built for production with two different config files in here, one to compile for development and one to compile for production, and then you set those scripts within here. So if you have one for production, it'll compile a Webpack file with this, with one of these flags, the mode flags on it. So if I was using a CI CD pipeline, and or if I'm doing any type of unit testing, I want to basically define my two files. If it's a production, if it's even if it's a staging file or QA, whatever, I'll set my flags here. I'm sorry, and run these scripts here. So in my CI CD pipeline, it'll basically it'll run one of the scripts from script block and then compile those files for a given Webpack config. But anyway, going back to our initial conversation, so I didn't realize that I had a backslash at the end of this expression, which, you know, it's early in the morning for me right now. But anyway, so I removed that. I ran the Webpack on this build here, and it seems to have worked out okay. And you can see my bundle file is finished and compiled. And so that's how you go and compile your JavaScript. There are several other options based on if you're running a Vue application or a React application or even TypeScript. There's other options to do that, but if you wanted to separate it from this particular loader, you can just set a new rule, which will be, you know, another block. And then let's say, for instance, I want to do a TypeScript. So there is a TypeScript loader. You just, you know, create your expression TS or TSX, right? And I want to put this in like that. And then the loader would be TS loader, right? And then that would be your rule for your TypeScript. So we're gonna do the same thing for our Sass files using the Sass loader, and the Sass loader and the CSS loader in my next video. So check that out, and thank you. So if you like this content that I just shared, please subscribe to this channel. Go ahead and hit that notification button while you're at it, so you could actually be notified when I post my next video.